24 de fevereiro de 2022 ficará para sempre na história como um dos dias mais importantes do século XXI. Na madrugada, forças da maior potência nuclear do planeta invadiram seu vizinho em uma guerra de conquista que não era vista em décadas. O mundo assistia em choque ao desmoronamento da ordem mundial com a tentativa russa de apagar a Ucrânia do mapa. Putin, cego pela ambição, isolado da verdade pelos seus subordinados, esperava uma rápida conquista. E ele não poderia ter errado mais. Tudo bem mais simples se a gente tivesse todo mundo num único vagão e se não tivesse ficado com essa cama de cima. 12 horas aqui. E aqui só tem a opção de ficar deitado. Você tem que ficar 12 horas deitado em si.
Horas de viagem de trem, 12 horas de viagem de avião, mais 4 horas de viagem. Agora amanhã tem mais 3 horas de viagem de carro, sem dormir, sem comer. Isso é independente de merda. Que é a guerra.
Chegamos, tá sujo.
De Kiev, e foram 16 horas de trem. A gente entrou no trem às 6h40 da manhã e saímos agora às 10h30 da noite, 10h40 na verdade. Só que esse já é o segundo dia inteiro de viagem e amanhã nós vamos acordar, pegar um carro e dirigir 10 horas pro leste da Ucrânia, para a linha de frente. A gente não come faz bastante tempo. Imagina na guerra, né? Não dorme também. A gente está se aclimatando para a realidade da guerra, porque esse é o lugar mais longe, que a distância maior que eu já viajei para chegar em algum lugar, porque não chega nunca. Já são 2 dias, vão ser 3 dias inteiros de viagem, inteiros, sem parar. Bom, pessoal, saindo de Kiev, acordei e aí fomos pegar um carro, alugar o carro, mas aí as locadoras não aceitaram, quando viram para onde a gente ia, né, para a região de Kharkiv, eles não queriam mais alugar o carro, aí ficamos correndo atrás de outras locadoras. O pessoal aqui tá dando suporte pra gente, ajudou, é uma ONG que traz jornalistas, então eles conseguiram encontrar uma outra locadora que aceitou e aí conseguimos pegar o carro e agora estamos na estrada. São 6 horas de dirigindo até a cidade. E antes a gente parou na cidade, né, em Kiev mesmo, na capital, e almoçamos. E foi bem interessante porque a impressão que você tem de uma cidade em guerra é que simplesmente está tudo destruído. E Kiev está totalmente normal. Você não vê destruição, a vida é normal, as pessoas andando na rua, verão europeu, um dia quente, muita gente jovem, todo mundo passeando na rua, restaurantes cheios. Inclusive uma cidade bem bonita, bem interessante, grande. Uma Europa diferente. Deu muita vontade de vir conhecer turisticamente, né? Enfim, passear. O problema é que hoje é muito difícil de chegar aqui na Ucrânia. Não tem voo. Então você tem que passar por uma saga. O trem ontem foi algo assim interminável, uma experiência à parte. Um Humvee aqui na estrada militar passando pela gente. Mas a cidade tá inteira, bonita, as pessoas vivendo a vida, né? Eu ouvi isso de outros ucranianas comentando que as pessoas estão mais estressadas, são mais agressivas no trânsito, e isso vem piorando ao longo do tempo. Eles acham ou percebem ou entendem que essa é uma consequência do trauma da guerra, do nível de estresse. Ninguém dorme muito bem, porque toca a sirene no meio da noite, aí você acorda, vai pro abrigo, aí no abrigo você tem que tenta voltar a dormir, só que aí sua cabeça tá funcionando, você já não consegue dormir, aí de repente já tá quase na hora de acordar, pra você ir trabalhar. Então, as pessoas não têm um sono tranquilo, uma vida tranquila. Por mais que a cidade não esteja destruída e num domingo de sol, no verão, tá todo mundo na rua, existem outros efeitos não visíveis da guerra. Agora nós estamos indo em direção ao leste, né? Estamos indo em direção à linha de frente. E lá nós vamos chegar mais perto da zona de combate.
Tell us, what is exactly your war? I mean, in terms of like, how do you make these decisions? What are the factors you're considering in buying certain weapons?
Basically, we analyze the situation from two sides, from the grassroots level and from the higher strategic level. We try to understand, firstly, the dynamic on the battlefield, which part of the front line are more intense than the others, what is the balance of power on the battlefield, what is the current strategies and cycle of innovation and adaptations, how basically people fight now. But then we also collect a lot of information from the grassroots level, and the brigades and battalions themselves, they issue a request for us and ask for certain capabilities that we can verify against our analysis to understand is going to help them. Is it how battles really fought now? Is it what's currently being effective? Or maybe we can suggest them a better way to resolve their problem. And we're, of course, in close cooperation with the General Staff too, which might provide like additional pieces of the puzzle. For example, when there was preparation for the so-called counteroffensive operation in 2023, the General Staff approached us with the request to situate the specific part of the front line with all the capabilities they need to make sure that all the necessary equipment is available for the upcoming offensive operation. Basically, we provide the entire ecosystem that military forces need to fight. We don't provide just drones, or we don't provide just machine guns. We try to build certain capabilities. So if we provide drones, we make sure that forces have all necessary cables, chargers, batteries, accumulators to actually employ those things, because that's sometimes a problem with individual volunteers. They buy drone, they provide it to the battlefield, but then you don't explode it for these drones. You don't have chargers for these drones. You don't have all other things to actually make use of these drones. We try to make sure that you receive the package from us, you just open it and actually deploy and actually use it on the battlefield. We make sure that you have a car to transport all this equipment that we provided to you, and we make sure that all the people who use this equipment actually properly trained to do that. Now, about 70-80% of casualties in the battlefield are inflicted by drones. So if at a certain point...
in Russia,
yeah.
70 to 80% of the casualties
yes.
are done by drones.
Yes. both in terms of the military personnel and equipment.
Okay.
Yeah, the situation is a little bit more complicated than that because artillery plays a huge tactical role. I mean, the very fact that artillery exists forces people to disperse, and which then allow them to hit them by the drones. But yeah, if you look by raw numbers, it's basically 70-80% of casualties are a result of the drone strike.
Yeah. What is your understanding from the military strategic perspective of the way the war is right now?
Strategic circumstances and strategic context around this war, I think there is a lot of confusion about the balance of power between Ukraine and Russia, because seen on the map, Russia is so huge and it's much larger economy, much larger human potential. So for a lot of people, and I commonly hear this argument like Ukraine is doomed and there is no way Ukraine can win or Ukraine can at least stop the Russian ones. That's not necessarily the case, because these ones seem to have a latent resource potential, and there is absolutely another thing to mobilize actually those resources. And for a number of political and technical constraints, Russia cannot mobilize all the resources that they have. The primary example is the human resources, because fear of political instability forces them to rely on this volunteer mobilization when they try to recruit with high payments, which give them about 30,000 people per month. That's sufficient to sustain their current tempo of offense, but if the lethality of Ukrainian troops increases and the margin is quite short for Russia, they will just run out of people. They will quickly face the dilemma either to risk political stability and to announce mobilization. And the last time they tried during the autumn of 2022, that caused a huge exile of the Russian men. The assessment varies, but we talk about between 300,000 people and 700,000 people, which for the Russian economy, which already struggles because of the labor shortage, is going to be a quite severe impact. Another part of this is that their production rates. Most of the tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, artillery pieces, they actually doesn't produce new systems because their production capability is limited, and because they cannot quickly increase those production, partly as a result of sanctions. They learned to obtain certain necessary components to produce missiles, for example, they need, but they so far failed, for example, to significantly increase the production of artillery systems because they lack all those machines necessary to forge barrels for artillery. By some estimations, for example, if the dynamic continues the same way as it currently is, they risk to run out of tanks by the end of this year or the first half of the 2026. The same goes about infantry fighting vehicles. They are not going to run out of artillery systems soon.
Artillery is critical.
But they forced to deploy increasingly inferior systems because they run out of relatively modern late Soviet systems, and they now have to deploy systems from 60s, 50s. We already even recorded the instances when they deployed artillery from the Second World War.
How important or how critical is the international assistance, the U.S.?
Ukraine currently produces about 30-40% of all capabilities and weapons it needs.
From the United States?
No, domestically.
30 to
40% produced domestically.
What is that ratio on the drone aspect?
Almost all drones that we use are produced in Ukraine. And because that's so important capability on the battlefield currently, that's a huge advantage for Ukraine. But then there are a lot of critical capabilities that Ukraine cannot produce itself. The most critical is, if we talk about the US, for example, it's air defense systems, particularly air defense systems capable to intercept ballistic missiles. There are European alternatives like SAMP-T, but there are only a few of such systems, and the production level of interceptor is quite low. So they will not be able to replace Patriots, at least in a short-term frame. So the ability to have Patriots and the ability to have, more importantly, even interceptors for the Patriots, or those missiles that actually used to intercept Russian ballistic missiles, is a paramount. But not least important is the intelligence, because US help Ukraine to actually have early warning about the launches of the ballistic missiles.
O estrago da maior guerra europeia em 80 anos é avassalador. Desde fevereiro de 2022, a Ucrânia vive um dos seus períodos mais sombrios, mas segue de pé. Mais de 46 mil militares morreram, cerca de 380 mil ficaram feridos e dezenas de milhares seguem desaparecidos ou em cativeiro. Sob bombardeios e apagões, Kiev tem um exército de aproximadamente 880 mil homens e mulheres, espinha dorsal de uma defesa que virou símbolo de coragem num país dilacerado, mas livre. A crise humanitária. 6,9 milhões de refugiados, 3,7 milhões de deslocados internos e mais de 2 milhões de moradias danificadas. Ainda assim, entre sirenes e escombros, equipes de resgate correm e a população reconstrói. Uma prova diária da resiliência que redefine o heroísmo ucraniano.
I think we first need to identify how we look at the war between Ukraine and Russia. Whether we look at the war between two countries, or as something which is just one of the elements of a process which started in 2008. So when the international order was completely invented, instead of who cares about the international? And then if you start from that point, then you can follow it, see that the conflict between different systems which started, and it will be just unfolded in the next decades. So we are most probably just right in the beginning. So analytically, when we try to see what war in the past, where the trends are going, and so on, what we see that the war will be expanded. The war will come to Europe, to other countries, to other European countries. And
That's what you believe. You believe.
I don't believe. It's not only believe, but that's one of our key scenarios. But these are scenarios which are told by our intelligences. So Baltic countries, Nordic countries, UK countries, Germany, France, and so on. They're preparing for 2027, 28 for new invasion. The only thing where we might differ with them is they think that they have 5 years. We think that they don't have 5 years. That's the key difference. Because
How many years do you think they got?
2 years. 2, 3 years. So all things.
But can they go to these other countries if they don't conquer Ukraine?
Of course, why not? Okay. Let's talk numbers. We were on a training workshop in Latvia. Latvia, in their peak, they're ready to mobilize 68,000 people.
60?
68.
68.
Yeah. So
It
that's
was 1.5.
and that the second thing. Okay, which approaches Russia will use? They will do it directly or via hybrid threats. What they do much better. And then Green Man will appear somewhere in Tallinn or Reykjavik or it's everywhere. And then the NATO will start gathering in Brussels in a couple months. So it's I think the first thing that we need to identify is that we as Ukrainians, we don't see it as Ukrainian Russian war. We see it as a much because it's like one of the elements of the thick ones. I mean, we clearly identify that so there is already access. There is access of Russia, Iran, North Korea, and so on. And this is
I call this axis the axis of dictatorships.
the access of the well, we have many names, but the thing that this is the funny thing that even though 1 year ago we loved about North Koreans, but at the moment it is one of the few armies in the world who have an experience of modern warfare, and that the key thing which also military start understanding it, but for sure it's not well understood by politicians or by population at the moment. But here we are once again right in the beginning of the modern warfare invention. And the impact will be very similar to invention of the powder. Incredible. And North Koreans and others, they got this experience of this modern warfare. Yes, they were, but they got the experience. None of the Western countries had this experience.
And this is why we're saying that the Europeans are missing out. Those guys are already receiving this experience of what it is to work with unmanned systems, with robotized platforms, etc. And the Europeans are still thinking of how to modernize a tank. And this is the difference in the mindsets of how the different sides are prepared for warfare. As Yuri rightly mentions, is a psychological thing, and we don't blame anybody. We've been there at the beginning of 2022, where the vast majority of Ukrainians was also trying to shut down their ears and not think and listen to
Everybody you're saying no, not that
exactly.
everyone was saying that they are evading, they are ready to evade.
We were in total denial, absolutely, and that's why, of course, we want other people to learn our lessons and see the horrors that we are undergoing on a daily basis and show them and say, please get prepared because you might be next. But at the same time, just as an individual, we also understand it's difficult to prepare unless you have seen this horror or you have undergone this through with your own skin.
Because the issue here is if the US abandons Ukraine right now, and you've been talking about initiatives and ways and how to, you know, make this dependence less important. But if it happens right away, what is the plan? How is Ukraine going to survive?
It would be very bad and hard and complicated to such a partner as the US. And I believe it's not something that's going to happen because it's a beneficial interest for both countries to be in this partnership.
Either for Trump.
Of course. Like, what's happening in Ukraine now? Ukraine is the strongest army in the European continent. Whatever US wants to do in this world, having, not having such an army as a partner would be really, not the smartest thing to do. Ukraine is the only country that can and able to fight the modern warfare that our partners in NATO has no idea about. They're just we are working pretty closely with a lot of countries regarding the military technologies and the training of the personnel. And unfortunately, what we see that a lot of NATO countries are getting ready to the war that is not going to happen. They're preparing for the war of the past. They're not ready to fight the war of the current times and have no idea about the wars of the future. So Ukraine has a unique army, unique experience, unique processes and procedures, unique technologies that every army and every partner, every country in the world would be happy to be a partner with. So I really doubt, and it would be very disappointing for both sides to lose such a partnership as Ukraine and US currently has. And we have a fruitful and beneficial partnership. So I have, as my colleagues mentioned, I had no doubts that Ukraine will be capable to withstand. I'm questioning if Europe will be capable to withstand without Ukraine.